Well, good morning. My name's Doug Meadows. I'm the founder, visionary, and hero maker at David Douglas Diamonds, and this is my series of a century of legacy and luxury. And currently, I'm at the out in Colorado Springs at the Broadmoor, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to do my video from here, and just wanted to share with you. One of those stories that, it's just, I'm not super proud of it, but it's life. And, sometimes we go to school to learn stuff, and sometimes we go through the school of hard knocks. And this is one of my stories of my school of hard knocks that I'm not proud of by any means, but it is the reality of being in business sometimes. And maybe the stubbornness of being in business, I don't know. And I don't know really where to start it to put it in context. This is really kind of a Valentine's Day story, but I had too many other things to share with you, so I couldn't squeeze it in at Valentine's Day, so I got it as close to Valentine's Day as I could. I'm gonna jump off my normal track of kind of going through the timeline and just share a little story that happened to me. I moved down here in '82 from Michigan, 23 years old, had no clue what I was doing. I knew how to fix jewelry, I knew how to make jewelry, and I went into partnership with a buddy of mine. And we had what's called a lease department inside of another retail jewelry store where we provided all the services, the repairs, the custom designing, things like that. And that was 3 years of one of the hardest learning periods of my life. We begged, borrowed, and stole from everybody to end up buying this business. It was in a major mall in Atlanta. And again, we knew how to be jewelers. We didn't know how to be business owners. And after about those 3 years, after about 2 years, we lost our lease in the mall. And then we moved down into a nice little area called Vinings, which is beautiful. But shortly after that, we ran ourselves into bankruptcy. And what I like to say is we successfully put ourselves into bankruptcy. And that's when I talked my brother Dave into moving on down from Michigan. Actually, after we went into bankruptcy, we split up the company. I started looking for a job. I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out to be an owner or run a store. I think I'm going to just try to find a job. And so I started the job search of looking for a job being a jeweler. And I went into this one store not too far from my house, and I was just talking to the guy. I wasn't going into his store to get a job. I was just trying to network and see what information he might be able to give me in our area of maybe where I could even go look for a job. And he said, no, I said, I don't. He said, but why don't you buy my business? He said he had started a second store and he wanted to get rid of, the least performing store, I guess. So I talked my brother Dave into moving on down from Michigan, and we bought his store. So we took Dave's first name, my first name, Doug, and that's how we got the David Douglas Diamonds. We had that for a couple of years, and we had a silent partner in that venture, and it just was not doing well. But we got approached by our competitor to do a lease department inside their store. The interesting thing about a lease department is kind of like a business within a business, and you're doing what you love, what you know. You're doing repair work, you're doing custom work, and different things. And so we ended up closing that little tiny retail store down and joining a place called Kaminsky Jewelers. That stint lasted us about 17 years. And And we did good with that. I mean, it worked out really well. But while we were there, we bought the car wash behind the jewelry store. We bought a jewelry store in Norcross, Georgia. And this is around 1996, 97. And then we bought a pawn shop in the next town over. And I don't know, you just always think more is better. And it's not always better. We ended up selling the car wash. It was funny, I kept getting these people asking me to sell it. And I said, no, it's making me money. Why do I want to get rid of it? And so I finally had this one guy come up to me and he goes, you just name your price and I'll find you a buyer. And I go, fine. If I give you a price, it's non-negotiable. I don't want you coming back to me, giving me an offer. And so I put it up there high, what I thought was high at the time, and man, he ended up selling it. And so, I don't know, we did good with that. The store in Norcross was tough. We had bought an existing store. A couple had gone through a retirement sale, and so we bought the store. The logistics of trying to run a second location, I don't care if it's across the street or across town or across states, it's hard. It takes a different mindset altogether, different logistics, and we just weren't ready for that. The pawn shop worked out really good. A little bit of a learning curve with the pawn shop. But the Norcross store that we had, we went through some tough times with that. And I made a few mistakes. And one of the mistakes I did is, when it came time to pay matching taxes and sales tax and stuff like that, I couldn't do it. I didn't have it. The government is not the best lending institution out there. Around that same time at Kaminsky's, it was January, and I just knew, we'd been there for about 17 years, and I just knew that the relationship there, that we needed to stop and get out of there. But I didn't know how to do it. I was part of a faith-based business group, and we got together in February, and we're always looking for who's got a problem, who needs help. And I raised my hand and told them my situation, told them what our arrangements was, and they all agreed. They go, you need to get out of there. And so I was really struggling with how to get out of there. And so I kept praying about it, and just because if I just left and then I opened up the across the street from them, I felt like I would have been a dirtbag, and I just didn't have a peace about that. Tentatively the plan was to leave Kaminsky's and combine over in the Woodstock store and our pawn shop, but there wasn't much of a growth or opportunity there, and so I went on a mission trip to Fiji, and during that time, my wife called me up, and which was unusual, and she was pretty upset. And she said, when you come back, Kaminsky's is going to ask you to leave. And I said, okay, that's all right. That's not a problem. And it was just really neat how God had prepared everything for this to all come about. And when I came back, they asked me to leave, and I think they thought I was going to be pretty upset. But inside I was just jumping up inside with joy to be able to get that burden off me and get out of there. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't know what the future looked like. But kind of, I don't know, that was probably the summertime. And it took us till the fall to really figure out what our next step was. For a season, I worked out of our pawn shop, During that season, my brother opened up a second store in Woodstock. His idea was in the pawn shop, we bought a lot of stuff off the street. He could refurbish that and then sell it in a little bit of a nicer retail store, maybe a quarter mile away, and have two different names to where they wouldn't really be associated. And him and his son had started that venture. And it's really hard to give you a true feel and a timeline of how all this played out. I'm just trying to do my best with it here. But come fall, we finally opened up, and there was, I think, 2 or 3 employees is all I had. Small little store, and we were right on the heels of Christmas, and we got through it. And what was interesting is, hindsight, I look at it, when I was advertising that I was going to be there, we had created such a good reputation at Kaminsky's over the past 17 years that when people got my email, or not my email, but my postcard in the mail, they just threw it away because they had a good jeweler already. They weren't looking for a jeweler. It took quite a while for the word to get out that we were there. And so for the next 6 months, it was a struggle. And again, I began to borrow from the government. And the way I would borrow is I just wouldn't pay my sales tax. And so it took about, 3-4 years before payday really hit me. I had been in that location for probably, actually it was a little bit longer. I was there for about 6 years. And I finally got over a hump and started keeping my sales tax up to date, keeping my withholdings up to date. But I had that lingering debt that I owed the government. And the one thing, when you owe the government, there is no grace, there is no mercy. It is just penalty after penalty, and they're stiff penalties, and the interest is crazy. And so this debt kept building, and it was I didn't know how to battle that. I began to start to pay on it, but every little bit I paid hardly put a dent in it. And so really fast forwarding about 6 or 7 years, they kept sending me notices and different things. And so finally I made an appointment, went down there, and I talked to them about it. And my only option was to pay it. There was no payment plan, there was nothing. And there was no way I could. They wanted me to either get a loan and pay it off. Well, my credit was terrible. I destroyed my credit trying to get through those tough times and different things. And so finally, Valentine's Day 2010, actually the day after Valentine's Day in 2010, they came into my store. They had a sheriff at the front door and the back door. They put the tape on the door, and they basically shut me down. They confiscated every little bit of cash that they could find. They seized my checking accounts, and any money that I had, they took to go against the debt. And it was so funny, that morning, I was on my way to the refiner to get some cash. And my bookkeeper calls me up, and she goes, "Doug, where are you?" And I said, "I'm on the way to the refiner." She goes, "Well, I think maybe you should come on back to the store." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, the Secretary of State's here, and they got the sheriff here and stuff, and I just think it'd be a good idea if you get back here." And I go, "Oh, okay." So I turned around and headed on back to the store, got in there, introduced myself, and I told them, I said, "I am so glad you're here." And they looked at me like they were shocked. And she goes, "You're glad we're here? Why?" I said, "Because finally maybe we can talk." I said, I've been trying to talk to you for a long time and you just wouldn't talk. And so we hired an attorney and we went into negotiations. And I wasn't trying to get out of the debt. I wanted to pay it. I just had to pay it the only way I could, and I needed some terms. Well, shortly before that, maybe 3-4 months before that, again, God's timing was amazing on this because my son had started doing CAD designing, and he wanted to become what we call a service bureau, to where other jewelers could contract with him to create a design. And so we got him his own corporation going 3 or 4 months ahead of time, before all that, so that he could begin his business. And so that day that we got shut down, February 15th, 2010, and the reason that it was so funny, the reason the Secretary of State came in on that day is because they thought, yeah, there's a misconception about jewelry stores that we just really bank buck on Valentine's Day. Now, there are times when that really works well, but overall for me, I have never just crushed it for Valentine's Day. And they just thought I would be flushed with cash. Well, the other thing is people don't pay with cash anymore. They pay with a credit card. And so we kind of disappointed them there. But the next day, we literally reopened the store under my son's corporation and limped along for a couple of weeks till we could kind of build up a little bit of a cash reserve and get back up and going. But for the most part, there was very little disruption with it all. Fast forwarding, we completely got the sales tax debt taken care of. I have never been late again in my life. All my taxes are up to date. I've been able to get the company completely out of debt for many years now, and keep it out of debt. And it's not fun being there. I'd never advise it. I don't wish it upon anybody. But when you're starting out, that school of hard knocks, you're going to pay for your education somehow, some way. It was expensive for me, but I just constantly look back at my grandfather as he went through business and not knowing all the different challenges and struggles that he might have faced. I have no idea, but I can only imagine that he probably had similar tough times that I did. But I'm here today, and we've been blessed with a very strong business, and Joseph is going to be taking it over here soon, someday. He's already a partner with me. Years ago, my wife used to babysit this guy. He had a big construction company up in Detroit, and I always admired him. He was a good customer of mine, and I just looked at him for business wisdom and knowledge. And I told him I was moving to Atlanta to go in partnership, and he goes, "Partnerships are not good, dude." He said, "The only partnership you should ever have is your wife, in a marriage, and that's it." And so I've had 4 partnerships. Me and my wife, which we're still together after, 48, 49 years. And then 48 years this year. Me and Merle, which was a short stint, about 3 years. Me and my brother, which we were together for probably 20 years. And he had the wisdom and foresight. So when me and my brother split up, it wasn't because we were mad or upset or hated each other. My brother just had the foresight and the wisdom to say, it was never fun dealing with cousins and uncles. Let's not put our kids through this. Because we had kids coming up in the company, and it was tough. I really enjoyed my partnership with my brother. and I miss it, but that wisdom of what he did and said and put into place was really good. And we still have great synergy together, and we still work together on a lot of different things. He actually just semi-retired last year, and so I miss him at jewelry shows like this. But and then now my current partnership with my son, which has been amazing, and wouldn't give it up for anything. So I don't know that I can agree with my friend that partnerships, they can be tough. I've seen a lot of good partnerships work out, and they are definitely opportunities. The only thing I would advise with a partnership is never make it 50-50. Somebody's got to be either 51 or 49 or something, so. But I'm going to go for now, and we'll catch y'all next week. Thanks. Bye.